Welcome to Mind Shift Power Podcast, a show for teenagers and the adults who work with them, where we have raw and honest conversations. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome. Today we have with us Meera Shah. She is from New Jersey. She is 16 right now, and she's going to be a junior in high school this coming September. Right now is the year 2024 for all the future listeners. And she's the one that reached out to me to be on the podcast. So, Meera, tell us, why did you want to be on the show today?
Yeah, so thank you. So the main reason I wanted to be on the show was because around me, I'm seeing this, honestly, addiction to productivity that I think we really need to call attention to. Like, there's this constant competition to always be the best and always do more. And for example, in my high school, there's this idea of everyone getting to the Ivies, and kids' lives are shaped around like making this perfect resume from elementary school. Like, I literally know a fifth grader doing SAT prep, and honestly, I think that's insane. It's not how you should be living your lives. And scientifically, it's taking a huge toll. So, number one, I think people are getting almost no sleep. Like, personally, at the beginning of sophomore year, I was averaging like 3 hours of sleep. And I honestly had to kind of reframe that. But kids around me are just surviving on coffee, energy drinks, and this idea of taking breaks and getting sleep has just like constantly gone away. On top of that, you're seeing skyrocketing anxiety and depression rates. And I even read this one study that I think it ranked excessive pressure to excel right among poverty with like factors hurting adolescent well being. So just clearly this isn't right, and I think it all stems from like parent pressure, peer pressure, and societal pressure that I really think we need to start reframing.
All right. Well, that was definitely a mouthful. And I can't disagree with you on a single thing that you said, because I see it too. And I'm an adult, so I see things a little differently than someone who's actually in it like you are. But I think it's important for the audience to hear from someone like you who's actually in the middle of this really horrible culture that we've created and are in the process of making worse. Let me segue into another question. Really not a segue. Let me just ask you this. From your perspective, as a 16-year-old currently in this toxic productivity culture, where do you see your generation 10 years from now?
Yeah, so in 10 years, I think there's definitely going to be some people who've achieved wonderful things, but the majority of us, I think, are going to be burnt out and dissatisfied. Now, it sounds a little pessimistic, but if you look at the corporate sphere right now, how many people do you see who are actually enjoying what they're doing? And that thing is literally just going onto us as kids. There's so much pressure to just make $1 million as soon as you get out of college, rather than like actually pursuing something you like. And obviously, money is important, but when that becomes your only motivation, you're suddenly not going to be happy and you're never going to find something that satisfies you. And on top of that, I don't think we have this culture of taking breaks and taking time for yourself anymore. And that's just going to contribute to so many kids being burnt out.
Now, you sure you're 16? Because right now you sound like more mature than half the adults I know. For real. I don't care what nobody says, girl, you grown. You're 100% right. And again, I'm talking to the audience right now. Listen to this from a 16-year-old, because there's adults who have been screaming from the mountaintop some of the stuff she's saying right now. But this is from a 16-year-old who clearly is seeing the same things. And it's not good. I mean, we know in this country, I don't have numbers in front of me right now, but we know that, suicide is up high. This ties into this topic because one of the reasons suicide is high and lots of other mental health issues are so high is because of the culture that we are raising people in, the pressure that we're putting people on. Don't you agree?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's such a good point because I think when you're pushing kids to this breaking point, you're going to see so many mental health issues. And I think it's time we started addressing the root problem, being things like pressure, rather than trying to just put a band aid solution by being like, hey, if you're stressed, reach out to a couple people. Why don't we start addressing what is making kids stressed in the first place? Because we really need to change the culture we're living in.
Mic drop. Yes, girl. Absolutely. Absolutely. It goes to what I say a lot. I don't, I say it sometimes on this podcast, but in my, as the mind shifter, as my own, I say a lot. I talk a lot about dealing with the issues. And a lot of times we are, I'm going to give this analogy, um, based on what you just said. When you have a weed, you can cut off the head of a weed, it's going to grow back, right? And a lot of times we're cutting off the heads of weeds. And okay, it was leaning to the left before. We cut it off and now it's leaning to the right. We cut it off and now it's leaning north. We cut it off and now it's leaning south. All right. So no matter what we do, it's growing back because we haven't taken it out by its root. If you want to get rid of a weed, you never just cut it. If you want to get rid of it permanently, you have to, rip it out by its roots. And a lot of times we are, uh, you know, we're giving a baby a pacifier instead of the milk that he needs. And so we've talked a little bit about the problem. So coming from you as a 16-year-old who's currently in our systems, what do you see as the solution? And I know it's multifaceted. So what do you see as the solution coming from the adult part?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is a mindset shift, kind of reframing how you view productivity. Because productivity can be things like taking breaks and taking time for yourself. That all can contribute to this idea of success. But B, kind of reframing this idea of what you want your kids to do. Like a majority of adults definitely just want their kids to be happy. But that isn't going to come from a linear definition of success and a six-figure job at the ripe age of 23. It's going to come from doing things you actually enjoy and making sure you don't burn out by the time you get that job at 23 years old, because all those things matter. Now, another thing I really want adults to hear is that these things are actually taking a toll. Like, we've talked about the mental health effects, but let's look a little deeper, right? So, a lot of times I think adults talk about things like social media, right? Oh my gosh, social media is ruining kids' lives. And I completely agree. But why are kids turning to social media? Well, it's a numbing mechanism from when you're literally on the edge of collapse.
Mm.
So I think, again, it just comes to this idea of adults, please know this is real, and please know that we have to address the root, and please know that there are ways that you can reframe this idea of productivity and success.
Wow, you just said a whole lot. And oh wow, you're so right. How we see success is a large part of why we're failing as a nation on many fronts. And you're right, success is more than just a dollar amount and a
Yeah.
fancy car. There's a lot of people that have that and commit suicide and end up on drugs. Why do we have so many rich people in rehab centers? I mean, people don't really think about that because
Yeah.
we're not really solving the problem. Money solves a lot of things. It does not solve all things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you happy at the end of the day. It'll make you happy for about 25 minutes. After that, you feel empty because all you did was get stuff and fake people. you know so for the adults who hear what you're saying and maybe say, okay, well, what can I do about it? What do you have to say to them?
Well, what you can do about it is not put that pressure and have those conversations with your kids. Like when your kids think that you expect them to get into an Ivy League school, they're going to push themselves so hard to get into that Ivy League school because if anything, they care about your validation and they care about this. So if you can start having these conversations from the time that kids are young, like going to a small college is okay. Not having a perfect resume is okay. Living your childhood and actually being a kid is okay. I think those conversations can really make a difference.
I'm going to add to that. I completely agree. I think that it's important to speak the balance to that. Not because anything you said was wrong, but because I know that some people take things out of context. So with that, and I know, Meera, you can agree with me, what Meera is not saying is that we should just be a free for all and there should be no discipline and no goals and no structure at all. Because some people will take what you just said out of context and take it that way, even though that's not what you're saying at all. That's not, I just wanted to emphasize that's not what Meera is saying. And there has to be balance with all of that. Yes, absolutely. We want our kids to do the best. We want our kids to be the best. We want them to have status. We want them to feel accomplished, but at what cost?
Yeah. Hard work is so important, but it's not going to be hard work till the point of collapse.
Yes. Do you hear that, adults? Because some of y'all adults are over 30 and you still haven't learned this lesson that this 16-year-old understands right now. When you look at your friends around you, not just your friends, your peers, what is the biggest thing that you think that you see from them? Let me rephrase that. When you look at your peers around you, where do you see them headed? What do you see is going to happen next when you look at your peers?
Honestly, collapse. And I know this speaking from experience. When you push yourself so hard and you don't let yourself stop and you just keep doing more and more and more, you're going to collapse. And I know so many people have this idea that, like, okay, I'll push through it in high school, or I'll push through it for these next 10 years and then it'll be great. It'll all be worth it. The pain is worth it if I get that amazing job. The problem is that it's not worth it, because all these things are going to have long-term health effects, mental effects,
Mm,
and they're going to lead to burnout. So that's where I see my peers headed, to be honest.
that's bad for all of us
Yeah.
because a healthier people creates a healthier society. Broken people create a very broken society, which is what we're living in right now. Um, what do you have to say to your peers?
Yeah. So I think it's very similar to what I kind of just said, but being the best at everything and getting no sleep to get into a top college isn't worth it if you're going to burn out by the time you get to that college. It just isn't worth it. So I think that we need to tell each other that there is so much of your life ahead of you. And honestly, like, the college you get into, the resume you have isn't going to be the end all be all. Sure, working hard is so important
Mm-hmm.
and doing the best you can is so important. But if you're going to just keep pushing yourself, it's not going to be worth it. So I'd urge my peers to kind of take a step back and look at how they, A, prioritize things around them. Maybe pick a few things that you really want to work towards, and then take your other time and take it for yourself. Take breaks, have fun, kind of live your life. Kind of achieving that balance can be so important, and make sure that you don't reach that point of total collapse.
I just thought of another analogy of what you said. You said people are going to collapse, and it doesn't matter that you accomplish all this stuff on paper by the time you're 23 if you're barely alive to appreciate it. And I'm rewording what you said. It's kind of like, uh, it's kind of like, yes, I made it across the finish line with my car, but it has no wheels left. The engine is now gone. Everything broke down. So now that I made it to the town, I can't go anywhere in the town
Yeah.
because I overran my car before I got there instead of taking breaks and doing it in a balanced way. I completely agree with you. And I'm really glad that you brought up this topic. What else do you want to say to the audience?
Yeah, I think we just need to take a step back and address a couple things. One, suffering isn't worth it when you're going to collapse. I think that's the main point. Two, we need to achieve balance. And three, like, these things are taking a toll. I feel like there's so many, like, negative stigmas around, like, oh, it's okay, like, mental health isn't that bad. It'll all be fine. Working hard comes above all. But it really does take a toll, and if you just look at the research, you'll see the devastating effects. So I really want everyone to just take a step back, look at what you're trying to do right now, and see how maybe you can reprioritize. Adults and children, how can you figure out how you can balance your different priorities and figure out how you can both work hard but also take time for yourself?
Would you say what we really need is a cultural shift?
Yes, 100%. We live in a society that's literally obsessed with productivity. It's an addiction to the point where, like, we can't stop ourselves. That needs to change.
How do we change it?
Yeah, just those conversations. Like, I feel like it feels like, oh, well, how are we going to change it? Isn't the world running on productivity? But if you're willing to stand up and be like, look, I'm going to do my work and I'm going to get it done, but I also need like an hour break. Those things can be balanced. And honestly, you'll also be quote unquote more productive when you
Hmm.
take those breaks. Like, it's
Hmm.
scientifically proven you'll do better. So I think it's when we have those conversations that talk about, okay, taking breaks are important, not pressuring yourself to the point of total collapse are important, and we start making it so that that is the norm rather than every single like poster in the school being like do everything until you succeed, like success is the best thing in the world. Reframe that ideology and make it so that kids nowadays know, because the kids are going to be the future of this country, and if we have
Yes.
those
Yes.
conversations with our kids, we can actually change the way we have culture right now.
So some of the conversation needs to come from parents.
Yeah.
I think part of the solution is for some of the quote unquote adults who are running things need to listen to you. They
Yeah.
need to listen to people like you who
Mhm.
are in the system, who are in the process of going through these systems, that this culture that we've created, and not just shoving you off because, oh, you're young and dumb, you don't know nothing.
Yeah.
Because there are adults who have that attitude, which is real stupid. I'm sorry, but with adults who have that attitude, I question your intelligence, because that means that you have not even opened your eyeballs to pay attention to what's around you. Um, I do think part of the solution is getting the adults who are creating these systems to change their mindset. But let's like dive a little deeper into a subtopic off of that. Let's talk about college. We're taught in America that college is the end all be all and it is the only way to be successful. If you do not go to college, you are a loser. You will not be successful. You will not make a lot of money. And I'm here to tell you that is complete and total bullshit. It really is. It is total
Yeah.
bullshit. I have had people on the show talking about it because it is, while college is necessary for particular careers, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be, almost any kind of scientist, you do need a college degree. And I completely agree with that because the level of education needed for those fields is very vast. And you can make good money in those fields. However, maybe you were good with your hands and you want to be a mechanic. Maybe you want to be a hairdresser. You might own a hairdresser shop and make more money than the engineer. You might be a hairdresser and be a hairdresser for the stars and make more money than most of your peers who have master's degrees. That's an actual fact. That does happen. We it's important that we as adults make sure that we're letting you guys know that you need to think outside of that box, because for generations now it's been driven into us, nailed into us that college is the only way. College, college, college. But that's not true. College is the way for certain careers. I completely agree. And if you're not sure, you're better to be more educated than less. But if you are sure, go for what you're sure for. And I do think that that's part of the pressure. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Meera. I do think that that's part of the pressure that some youth are feeling, because the parents still are of that brainwashed mindset and I do call it a brainwashed mindset, that college is the only way.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And I think there's been a devaluation of a lot of careers. But if you take a
Yeah.
step back, these careers are the ones that are running the world. As much as we need our
Yes.
doctors and we need our lawyers,
Yep. Yep.
who isn't going to their local mechanic whenever their car breaks down? Who isn't going to the hairdresser like once every couple months? Like, we need these jobs and they are important. And on top of that, sure, college is important, and I understand that a lot of parents want their kids to go to college. But why do you want them to all go to MIT and Harvard? There are so many smaller schools out there, which I don't have anything against you if you go to MIT or Harvard. They're definitely fantastic schools. But those smaller schools, you can still get a good job. You can still
Yep.
be happy. You can still have an amazing environment. You don't need to go to these Ivy League. Like, honestly, they're just trying to make money off of you. Like, they're
Yeah,
making
no, you're right.
tons
You're
of
100%
profit.
right. You're 100% right.
There are so many other things out there besides that linear definition of where we all need to go.
I to add to that, I I heard a report recently. I watched it somewhere, don't recall where, but I wish I recall where so I could say it on the on the air right now. But um, it's an actual fact, and you can look it up. More and more companies are caring less and less where you went to school. Like it used to be that, oh, you're Harvard. Well, I'm going to put you at the top of my candidates. A lot of them are like, you have a degree. Do you know stuff? Okay, I don't care where you learned it. Like there's a lot more. There's a growing. Now there's still people who are going to be like so impressed. Ooh, you went to Harvard or MIT or wherever. But there's a growing in the professional world. There's a growing amount of people that just don't care about that anymore because they're starting to recognize how unimportant it is, how less important it is, and how much it doesn't hold. We need to think about this as a country and as a people. Why do we think that certain colleges are better than others? Why do we think college necessary? Because those who own it have taught us to think that way so they can make money off of us. Duh. Like you just said. Am I right?
Yes, for sure. And if you look at the stats, I think I read this New York Times article, but like the percentage of people who are in the top 1% who are going to the Ivy Leagues compared to like the working class, it is a question of money. And I'm not devaluing the people who do go to these fantastic
Mm-hmm.
colleges because I know they're like brilliant individuals, but it isn't everything and it doesn't represent who you are. You can
No,
be
it doesn't.
so much more than just a school title.
Right. And it's more important that you have understanding than just education on paper. Because I
Yeah,
have, on more than one occasion, I have been promoted into positions for which I did not have the accreditation for.
yeah. A
Dead
lot of people
serious.
just learn
In
through
throughout my career.
experience.
Yeah. And I've also, I'll give you an example. There was a few years ago when I worked at it. I won't say where I worked because I'll just, because that's not the point. I worked at a particular place and there was this person that had two master's degree. I got promoted over her and she got demoted.
Oh my god.
And I don't have two master's degrees. So, it wasn't a matter of, what she had on paper, what I had on paper. It was, I had the skill and the will and they could see me doing it. And I had the respect of the people we were working with. That was the key thing. Um, and that, at the end of the day, that's what mattered. And I'm saying that because if you are a teen listening right now and you are under some of the pressure that Meera's talking about, I want you to know that it's coming from an adult. I can tell you that the world that you're growing up in is changing, and some of what your parents think is necessary, some of it's correct, some of it's old school and not true anymore. So I would advise for you as a teenager who's looking into your career, discover what the trends are for yourself so that you can put yourself in the right place and not be under undue pressure to go nowhere and be unhappy.
Mhm.
Is
That
there anything else you want to say to the audience?
Um, honestly, the last thing I can think of is you've asked me what I think we can change in adults, students, and I think there's also a shift that we do need in the education system itself
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of that pressure is coming from it. Like,
Right.
if you look at the stats again, like, our education system was designed for industrial America decades ago. It doesn't
Good
apply
point.
to the world we
Good
live
point.
in.
Good
And I
point.
think there's this overwhelming ideology of pushing kids in one direction, even within our schools. But there's so many things that I think we can encourage, like vocational schools. I'm seeing an increase of that, which is amazing because it
Yeah.
allows kids to
Yeah.
take another path. But
Right.
also,
Exactly.
letting kids have more choice as they reach older and older years over what kind of classes they're taking, that can allow them to pursue their passion without feeling the pressure like, oh, I gotta take like this certain math class in like my senior year. Having that choice, obviously granted that you meet certain requirements and you do work hard and you keep up your grades, I think that can really help alleviate some of the pressure we're seeing today.
I want to add one more thing to that. And again, I'm talking to the teens. Depending, every state that in the United States and Canada, because this is for the US and Canada, all of our school systems are not the same. And because each state and each province area, they can do their own things. So sometimes the education in Mississippi, for example, very different than education in New York, which is probably different than education in Florida. They're because we can create our own rules, so to speak. Keep in mind, our education system is not created for everyone. Ideally, people say it's supposed to be blah, 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 just yes, lip service, really. But in reality, our education system, traditionally speaking anyway, is really only set up for like one type of learning, which doesn't apply to at least half of society. How's that working out? It's not. Our numbers are dropping. In first world countries, we're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to education, when it comes to science, when it comes to technology, and not in every way, but in many ways.
Yes.
And that's bad, you know? And I just want to say that to any teenagers listening, keep in mind that our education system, it may not be built for you. Don't feel stupid if it's not. Sometimes it's a system that's stupid, not you.
Yeah.
And I will end on that note. But thank you, Meera, for coming on. I really enjoyed talking to you on and off air. You are definitely an adult mentally. I'm very serious. You are more mature than a lot of adults that I know, who don't even get some of the stuff that you're already saying. So please continue to grow and continue to speak out and speak up, because some of us are actually listening.
Thank you so much.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. I want to plant a thought seed in your head today. For you adults that are listening, I hope you notice that this was a 16-year-old girl with the maturity of someone well beyond her years. However, everything she had to say actually was right on point. But I want to point this out. There are a lot of other Meeras out there. It is not just her. Having worked with teens, I can tell you there are many of them that have a lot to say, and we should listen. Adults, we need to start really, truly listening to our youth. Yes, we do have to tell them what to do. We do have to teach them. We do have to guide them and all of that. Absolutely. But we also need to make just as much effort at listening. The truth is, an 8-year-old today and an 8-year-old when you grew up are not the same in any way, shape, or form. I have worked with and seen many teenagers who are extremely mature, but we slough them off and don't listen to them because we think they're young and dumb. Perhaps you're old and dumb. Listen to them. They have a lot to say. And even if they say it in a little whiny teenage way, listen to content. Listen to what they're actually saying. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. If you want to solve a problem for our youth today, it starts by actually listening and considering what they have to say and their views. Please listen to our teens. Thank you for listening to Mindshift Power Podcast. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at The Mindshifter. If you have any comments, topic suggestions, or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit fatimabay.com/podcast. Remember, there's power in shifting your thinking. Tune in for next week.